Good evening, everybody. Welcome in to another episode of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. I am Tyler Johnson. I am joined by Jordan Dalton. JD, this is going to be a rough show. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing all right. Not too excited to talk about this past weekend, but
yeah, I don't think anyone would be excited to talk about this, but got to get into it. But before we do, I do want to take a second. If you guys are joining us on Facebook or YouTube tonight and you are not yet subscribed to the channel, please take a second to subscribe. It is free to do. We have lots of giveaways available that are only available to those that are subscribed to our YouTube channel. So with Christmas coming up, we're going to have some awesome giveaways, but you'll only be able to get to those if you are a member of the YouTube channel. Also, feel free to drop a like on the video. It really helps the channel grow and Network 216 grow as a whole. So we appreciate everyone that shows support to Network 216. We want to take a second to hear from our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. What's up, everybody? We know that daily fantasy never stops, and Network 216 is proud to be a partner with Underdog Fantasy. Very simple to use. All you have to do is go to underdogfantasy.com and you will just click the sign in button. You'll create an account if you haven't done so already. If you've not created an account, it'll ask you to enter a code. Enter code 216 and they will double your first deposit up to $100. Underdog Fantasy, live draft lobbies that you get to compete with you and your friends. It's no salary cap like DraftKings and FanDuel. You get to go to a draft lobby, pick the players you want, or you can do daily pick'ems, which give you access to all the NFL and NBA games for you to make your picks every single night. Again, go to underdogfantasy.com or use the Underdog Fantasy app on iOS or Android. Use code 216 to double your first deposit up to $100. Sign up today. JD, it was a rough one on Saturday. I'm not going to beat around the bush with it. Ohio State lost to Michigan 45-23. Second half was absolutely embarrassing as Michigan outscored the Buckeyes 28-3. First takeaway just from this game for me is the one thing I was worried about all year against Michigan. I didn't believe they were necessarily the better team talent-wise. They were more physical. That's the thing Jim Harbaugh is known for. His teams are physical. They're good at the line of scrimmage. It didn't matter if they had Blake Corum in this game. Dominated every facet of this game. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, the physicality was definitely a big part of it. I mean, we talked about it in the group. I think Kate Stover had a quote regarding the physicality, and we're like, it's still questionable. We haven't really seen it tested. I mean, the Penn State game was a pretty physical game. But Michigan was definitely the best team we've played all year.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They were the best team we've played all year. Josh, appreciate it, man. Like you said, subscribe and hit that like button. Appreciate you tuning in, Josh. If anyone who is joining us has a question, feel free to send it into the chat. You have to be on the YouTube channel to send those questions, or you can from Facebook, but we really recommend YouTube. We're here to air your grievances with us. That's what this show is for tonight. There's going to be a lot of hot takes, and we want to hear yours as well. But, yeah, JD, I mean, this game, Donovan Edwards had 22 carries, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think in the first half, Ohio State did a great job of keeping that Michigan run game contained. The defense was fantastic in the first half. The only thing in this game is, when Dustin was on last week, talked about, can J.J. McCarthy do enough to beat Ohio State? He did enough because the Ohio State secondary, like we've talked about before the season started, just awful at cornerback. I mean, you let guys on this Michigan offense that even Dustin hadn't even heard of some of these guys that were showing up on Saturday. Like, Ohio State got embarrassed in that secondary on Saturday, and there's no way to put it. And that's Jim Knowles. You a little frustrated that Jim Knowles didn't really seem to make an adjustment, and he just kept sticking with that man coverage that clearly wasn't working.
Yeah, especially there in the fourth quarter when they ripped off those 2 long runs. They were running like a 0-man all defenders on the line, and they just kept running it, and Michigan was getting through that first line, and then there's nobody behind it to stop the run. So it was really frustrating to watch because I feel like there was a point in the first half. Like, number one, we couldn't put the ball in the end zone. That was a big thing that we noticed early on this season is we get down to the red zone, settle for field goals, and then we were not putting the ball in the end zone. And then, there was a point where if we would have scored, so we had the opening drive touchdown, and then after that, if we would have scored one more touchdown, I felt like there was a momentum shift that would have happened that I don't think Michigan would have been able to call themselves out of. But they kept themselves in the game on defense, held Ohio State to a couple field goals. It was only a 3-point game at halftime. And then, or was it tied at halftime? Was it 20-17 or 20-20?
No, at halftime. At halftime, it was the 2017. Ohio State was up at half.
Yeah, so they kept themselves 3-point game going into halftime, and then the defense just fell apart. And it was big play after big play. McCarthy wasn't doing anything special. He just had a wide open receiver running down the field. Nobody, and we saw it earlier this year where it was I forget who we were playing. Where I mean, it happened in a couple.
Penn State. I know Penn State. It happened.
Penn State. There was two really big plays, and the big plays. I mean, I wasn't on last week, but that would have been something I would talk about. Is can this defense? Michigan's not even a home run hitting team. They don't have a lot of big plays on their offense, and the defense was just gifted to them over and over. Missed tackle, touchdown. Missed assignment, touchdown. Let's 0-man blitz, touchdown. And then let's do it again, touchdown. 4 touchdowns in the second half. It's hard to win a game when your defense is falling apart that much.
Yeah. I mean, when your defense is struggling like that, there really is nothing you can do. But I think the bigger question has to be asked here. What is Ryan Day's status moving forward? And I'm not talking for next year. He's here in 2023. I think that's a given. There were some questionable decisions yesterday. The bubble screen, for one, when it clearly wasn't working, still going to it. Starting Chip, playing Chip, Turiyama, I can't even pronounce his name correctly. But anyway, playing him over Dalen Hayden after Dalen Hayden just won you the Maryland game. Mayan Williams clearly wasn't 100% because he wasn't getting the ball at all. Some questionable decisions by Ryan Day. And moving forward, we're in a position with Ryan Day. If he loses again next year, and you don't want to get too far ahead, Ryan Day is coaching for his job next year. Do you agree or disagree with that?
If he doesn't beat Michigan next year, he's 0-3 against Michigan.
And that means he's fired, correct?
I don't know. Because Jim Harbaugh was, 0-6 against Ohio State, but he was also rebuilding the program. Ohio State is top 3 in recruiting every year. We were expected to make the national championship game this year. So last year he said Rose Bowl victory was a failure in his mind. Mm-hmm. And we might be in the exact same spot we were last year with a better team.
It's painful. I mean, to wait. I'll say this because this is how I feel personally. To me, it is wasted. Just some of the best talented teams we've ever had is what Ryan Day to me is wasted. Last year, there's still, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit because there still is a path, believe it or not, for Ohio State to make the college football playoff. But Ryan Day, to me, is just wasting some of this top-notch talent that we have. I mean, he's a great recruiter, and no one's going to debate that. There's no conversation to debate there. But right now, this team is not geared to beat Michigan. You're getting destroyed in the trenches, which is where Michigan's good at. And you know what? You have to give credit to Jim Harbaugh where it's due. He saw where his team struggled against Ohio State, and what did he do? They got better. He just kept recruiting the same guys, the same type of players he needs, and they found the formula that works. And Ryan Day has yet to adjust, has yet to change any single thing now that he's lost to Jim Harbaugh back-to-back years. So I want to bring up Ryan Day, like as far as if he loses again to Michigan in 2023, would he be gone? He would be 0-3 against Michigan. That's important to point out. Now, you also bring up a good point. Michigan was in a rebuild when Jim Harbaugh was going 0-5, 0-6 against Ohio State. I believe I think the standards are so high at Ohio State. If he goes 0-3, I think he's can. I just can't see a scenario. If Ryan Day goes 3 years in a row without a Big Ten title and not beating Michigan, I think he's done here. I don't know how you can bring him back. The last coach that had that bad of a record against Michigan was John Cooper. John Cooper had a 3-8 bowl record. He was 2-10-1 against Michigan. 2-10-1. And most of those losses came during 1993, 95, and 96. And those were the years that Ohio State entered the game undefeated and were ranked in the top 5. And they were upset by Michigan those years. I'm sensing a trend. And it's not a good trend. So
it's crazy. It's crazy.
What do you think, man? Like, in your honest opinion, if he loses again to Michigan, you're not winning the Big Ten title. So take that out. Because more than likely, Michigan's undefeated again. Let's just say that. He loses again to Michigan. This is going to be in Ann Arbor. No Big Ten title. You're probably, again, not going to – unless it's an 18 playoff. What? It might not be. Or 12, whatever it's going to be. Ohio State doesn't make the college football playoff. Don't win a Big Ten championship. Don't beat Michigan. Is Ryan Day gone after 2023?
Yes.
Okay.
And the crazy thing is, he didn't lose last year until the Michigan game. And then the year before that was the COVID year, his first year. And who did we lose to the COVID year? Clemson.
Time out, JD. He did lose once last year.
Who did he lose to last year?
Oregon.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Early. So the big losses were Alabama national championship.
Yeah.
And then Oregon, Michigan. Say they run the table again, get to Michigan, loses again to Michigan. That's every big game that he's played in, other than the Clemson playoff game that he won. And the Rose Bowl it should not have been that close, honestly. Utah had a good team. They did, but it was way closer than it should have been. Honestly, the defense was pretty bad last year, but that's not a good record for Big Time. And it's almost reminds we're almost on like when Georgia couldn't get over the hump, they couldn't beat Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kirby Smart finally did it, won the national championship. Like that's like we're almost at that point where like Michigan just little brothered us, big brothered us.
Yeah, I mean,
2 years in a row they crushed us.
The reality is, like, and it pains you to admit it, Michigan is the overall better team than Ohio State from the standpoint when the two play. Ohio State cannot match the toughness Michigan has. They can't. Right now, what we have, and I was talking to some of my cousins about this, because this is what I believe. Ohio State has a Pac-12 offense. They have an offense that can pretty much score against anybody. That defense is an ACC-level defense. They can beat the teams they're supposed to beat and shut them down. When they face a good team, they get destroyed. That's what we saw. I mean, that's what we saw last year against Oregon. That's what we saw against Michigan.
I don't agree with that. I think defense is not good, but the ACC is pretty bad.
It is.
So you guys think like Michigan is playing. Oh, yeah, I thought this during the game, and if we were playing trestle ball, we would be beating Michigan. We'd be beating Michigan.
I agree.
If we were playing trestle ball, and everybody hated trestle ball. It was conservative. It was ground and pound. It was in the trenches. It was not fun to watch. It was not a Urban Meyer spread offense, which is the some sort of offense we run right now. We're running the Ryan Day version of Urban Meyer's offense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not Urban Meyer's offense. Urban Meyer's offense would score 40 points against Michigan. Urban Meyer's offense would – I mean, Urban Meyer's defense would have played better than what we're seeing the past 2 years. But, yeah, I think if we were playing Trestle ball, I don't even think that would have been a close game because there was I'm telling you, there was a point during that game where we had them on the ropes and we just couldn't punch it in the end zone, and we kept them alive in the game. And then they came out of the second half and literally just kicked us in the nuts over and over. And it was like there was nothing we could do about it. I've never seen Ohio State lose a game that bad. Not even we. Take the Alabama game, the national championship. Alabama was so stacked.
Yeah.
And going into that game, you knew Alabama had the best team in the country. It was like you were like Ohio State's an underdog going into this game for a reason. But like this, like that was the worst loss we've seen in a long time as a Buckeye fan, because it was against Michigan at home and we were favored and we were undefeated and we're both undefeated. It was the worst loss we've seen in a long time. So
yeah,
Michigan fans have a right to celebrate because they whooped us.
Yeah, I mean, they completely earned that victory. There's no way around it. They completely destroyed Ohio State really in every facet of the game. You mentioned Jim Tressel, and it's funny you mentioned Jim Tressel. We actually have some breaking news. Ohio State's president, Christina Johnson, is reportedly set to announce her resignation on Tuesday as president. The reason this is interesting, Jim Tressel is supposed to leave Youngstown State in February. And Jim Tressel was the president of Youngstown State. Not saying it'll happen. It would be interesting to see Jim Tressel as president of Ohio State, but probably won't happen. I just think it would be cool. Oh, man. But I'm also glad you brought up Tressel Ball, because one of his coaching disciples is actually now in the Big Ten. Luke Fickell is now the new coach at Wisconsin. Before we go to the college football playoff talk, JD, what are your thoughts about Luke Fickell going to Wisconsin? I think it's a great hire for them. I think it's a really good job for him. I mean, he got $7.9 million a year, which is incredible for 7 years. He plays that tough, hard-nosed football that Wisconsin is known for. Wisconsin has a lot of talent at running back. I think he's set up pretty good moving forward. I mean, Wisconsin needs a quarterback. Cade McNamara could be an option because he did decide he is going to transfer from Michigan as a graduate. That could be an option right there. I don't know. I like what Wisconsin's doing. I like the Luke Fickell hire. A little disappointed because I would love to see him back at Ohio State at some point. But either way, what are your thoughts on Luke Fickell going to Wisconsin?
I think I put in the group, I was like, that seems like a lateral move for Luke Fickell. But, I mean, when you think about it, he's back in the Big Ten under more gracious circumstances. He's a head coach at a program that he can rebuild, similar to how he built Cincinnati. He's going to get better recruits at Wisconsin. Wisconsin it does play his brand of football, so I think it's a good style fit for him. And he's a defensive guy, so it's going to be a good fit, and hopefully he can get Wisconsin back on the path up. They barely missed out on the Big Ten championship game this year because the West was a circus.
Yeah.
I don't think they knew who was playing in the Big Ten championship until all the games concluded on Saturday.
Yeah, because Iowa blew it on Friday. All Iowa had to do was win on Friday, and they were in.
Yeah, they blew it. Who'd they lose to? It was someone bad, right?
Nebraska. Then Nebraska went and hired Matt Rule. At some point, once the season's over, we'll break down like the coaching hires around the Big Ten because I think there have been some
Matt
pretty
Rule
big
hire is really interesting. There's
Yeah,
going to be some really high-profile coaches in the Big Ten next year.
I really want to talk about that because, like I said, once we get to like the end of the season, I think that's a great like to reflect on like who's been hired, who like could just go around the entire Big Ten because you mentioned that Matt Rule hire I think is huge personally. Nebraska is a program that has a huge history, so getting them back to where they belong could be great for the Big Ten.
I've never seen Nebraska good at football.
We saw them good when we were young. That's it.
And they weren't great. They were ranked, but they weren't great. They used to be like Nebraska, Alabama. Like those were the teams that they were powerhouses for
Tommy Frazier, Eric Crouch days. That's when Nebraska
Scott Frost led them to a national title.
Scott Frost too.
So yeah, they have a huge history. So that's pretty cool to see them really get a high profile coaching hire. I mean, he didn't pan out in the NFL, but he was before he took that Panthers job, he was the guy that was sought after by a lot of colleges to try to rebuild their program. So I bet Nebraska was in it to try to get him the first time around, but they were still pretty invested on Scott Frost. So I think that they saw the opportunity, and I think it worked out really well. So we'll see where Nebraska is in a couple of years. I don't think it's going to be an immediate thing, but I'm interested to see how he builds that program because, man, if Wisconsin can become a power again, Nebraska becomes a power. Now you get USC, UCLA, Lincoln Riley coming in. It's just it makes the Big Ten better, makes an undefeated season for Ohio State look that much better. So can't hate it. Can't hate all those moves.
Yeah, exactly. I welcome it. I want more competition for the Big Ten. I want Ryan Day to show that he's a better coach than everyone else. And I mean that like sincerely. I really want that to be just proof that he's the better coach than everyone else. And doesn't just have all the talent.
Born on third base.
But as we're wrapping things up, we're going to move on. We're going to talk college football playoff. But before we do, we want to make sure that we hear from our sponsor with Homage. Christmas right around the corner.
What's up, guys? We've been talking about Homage for a really long time, but I can't get across how comfortable the products are. Like, this is literally the softest hoodie that you'll ever have. And it's not just about, comfort when it comes to the style. It's effective as well. It keeps you warm. I mean, look, this thing is not, it's all vintage looking, but it's looked like this. I've owned this thing for 5 years. So you got Ohio State, you got the Browns, you got the Cavs, you got the Guardians. They've got everything to have you covered all year long for all your Cleveland sports. I know the Victory Monday thing's a little brutal this year, but we got all kinds of awesome designs. You got to check them out. We'll put a link. There's always links in all of our episodes in the descriptions and sometimes in the comments as well. They're the best on the market, man. I don't even know what to say anymore, but go over there, check out Homage today. Go Cavs.
All right, JD, we know there's going to be a shakeup in the college football rankings. Ohio State's out of the top 4. I think that's 100% a given. In the AP poll, the Buckeyes are dropped to number 5. It's conference championship week, though. There are a lot of games that still have to determine the top 4. USC, they have a rematch with Utah, who they lost to earlier this year. Utah's only a 2-loss team. Utah obviously is in the conversation, but that's going to be a great Big Pac-12 championship game. Then TCU will play a top close to top 10 Kansas State. So, what do you think? I mean, as far as the rankings are coming out here, there's still a lot to be decided. LSU has been eliminated. You know who's right there? Alabama.
Yep.
Is Alabama out of this thing, or are they still in it in your mind?
They're out. Easy. I don't even think it's up for discussion because their 2 best wins aren't better than Ohio State's best 2 wins. Their 2 losses are way worse than Ohio State's loss. Michigan's ranked number 2 now. So I don't even think it's a conversation. No 2-loss team has ever made the college football playoff. I don't see that trend happening this year because there's going to be 3 1-loss teams at least ahead of Bama for that 4 spot, right? So
yeah. Well, okay. So here's the thing, JD. So last week's rankings, and again, we don't have this week's yet. We'll get those tomorrow at 7:00 on ESPN. Alabama was ranked 7th last week. You had LSU in front of them, and you had USC in front of them. Ohio State should, and I believe will be ahead of Alabama. Call me wrong on this, man. They might have Alabama at 6.
They will. But
you think that means Alabama has no chance?
The only way they make it in is if USC and TCU lose.
Yeah,
and I don't see that. I don't see both of them losing. I think USC takes care of business against Utah. They go in as 3. TCU loses to Kansas State. Ohio State's in at 4. And then I think there's a possibility of a Ohio State Michigan national championship.
Man, could you imagine?
I truly do, because if we're in at 4 and we're playing Georgia in that first game, I think we beat Georgia, and I think Michigan takes care of business against USC.
Ooh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Whoever would be USC would be 3.
Okay. Now let me ask you this: what team has a higher percent of chance of losing on Saturday? Is it? You think TCU? You think TCU over USC, considering USC already has?
So overrated. They're so overrated.
It's hard to say that, man. They find ways to win, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
They haven't played anybody decent, dude.
More ranked wins than we do, my man.
You could say that, but they're playing in the Big 12. Who's their best win? Who's their best win?
I'm pulling.
You said Texas.
Kansas State was 13th. Texas is up there too.
What was
those are 2 ranked wins. Ohio State has 1 ranked win.
Texas has 3 losses.
They do.
4 losses.
They do, but they're still ranked though. So
they're so trash.
When you're looking at resumes though, and you're comparing, Ohio State has 2 top 25 wins. True. We got blown out by Michigan. I don't know. It's tough. Because if you look at it this way, then let's say TCU does lose. I don't know if they're necessarily completely out of the conversation either, because Kansas State's a top 15 team. Oh man, it's so tough. Because
right. Listen to this.
Okay.
Because all year, Ohio State number 2. I don't think there was ever a question throughout the year. The College Football Playoff Committee believed Ohio State was the 2nd-ranked team. They went and they lost to number 3. Number 3. It wasn't number 13. It wasn't number 23. It was number 3. The logic would say they're still a top 4 team, right? Because they just lost to a top 3 team. And the committee still might still see them as a top 4 team. So there's a chance. There's a chance that the committee tomorrow is going to put a 1-loss Ohio State team at number 4. I'm not saying it's a high chance, but there's going to be an argument made in that room, in that committee, that Ohio State still is a top 4 team in the country.
Are they? But in your mind, are they?
They're not. They're not. Not in my mind. But they're. I'm just saying there's a chance that the committee says Ohio State's still number 4. We don't care what happens. But I think that's going to be the thing, is they're going to want to see these championship games play out prior to making that final decision, kind of similar to what they did back in the first college football playoff back in 2014, where they had Ohio State on the outside looking in prior to the Big Ten championship. And we went out there, blew out Wisconsin 59-0, and earned that number 4 spot over TCU. So there could be a similar situation where they still view Ohio State as number 4, but since Ohio State is playing or is not playing in those championship games, that one of those teams can kind of earn their way in, whoever it might be, whether it's USC or TCU. So yeah. I think that is a possibility that they might have us top 4, and then we get booted at the last second because we didn't win a conference championship. TCU blows out Kansas State. Now they finally have earned that number 4, even though they're undefeated. They're the only undefeated team other than Michigan and Georgia. So I think that ranking is going to be Georgia, Michigan, TCU number 3 because they're all undefeated. And then USC is going to be number 4.
I see it. I mean, that's exactly how I would say it too. I think it's a situation then, like let's say, and again, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but even if TCU loses, let's say they lose by 3, game-winning field goal, they lose to Kansas State.
What was the score of the first game between them?
The score of the first game, they beat Kansas State by 10.
Okay,
So let's say in this case, TCU has 1 loss, Ohio State has 1 loss. Ohio State's loss is to Michigan, undefeated Big Ten champion. But let me clarify, blowout to Michigan because that's what it was. TCU is a 1-loss team, runner-up in the Big 12, that lost in a title game by a walk-off field goal. To me, it's tough because, again, if you look at it, both teams still have 2 top 25 wins. Which loss looks better? Because they do look at that too. If you're looking at who you're going to put in at 4 and it comes down to that, you want to see how a loss it was. Do you want to put Ohio State in after they got blown out by Michigan? Do we want to see that again? Or do they want to give TCU an opportunity that we haven't seen against some of these other teams? Do people want to see Ohio State and Michigan again after Michigan dominated Ohio State? That's they have so much to weigh with all this, and I'm so glad I don't have this job. Or people know that I work on that committee because that would be brutal, to have that job. John weighs in here. He says Georgia, Michigan, TCU, USC, just like you said. He also made a good point. Stetson Bennett, Max Dugans, J.J. McCarthy, and Caleb Williams, all these quarterbacks in the college football playoff would torch the Buckeyes secondary.
I don't agree with that.
Stetson, I don't think
Stetson's not good.
Stetson's not, but I think the rest would. I mean, McCarthy already did. And Caleb Williams, I think, put up 700 total yards against us. But, it's going to be crazy, man, because, again, USC is playing Utah. I think Utah is still a pretty good team. I mean, they have 3 losses. It's still Utah. What they're known for, they're a tough, hard-nosed football team, and they can score. They beat USC this year. I don't really think that's anything to sneeze at, personally. I think that they're a pretty good team. If there's a game that USC could lose, that is the game. Because I just think that's the one team that can match up with USC, but containing Caleb Williams is something that's just not. Nobody can really do. So that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, they only lost by 1 point. They lost
Caleb
by
Williams
1 point.
He's going to be in the Big Ten next year.
Destroy us. He had 381 yards in that game. He had 5 touchdowns. He also had 57 yards rushing. So he had over 400 total yards against Utah's normally one of the best defenses in the Pac-12. So
I will say anything can happen, man. Look out for LSU, Georgia. What happens if LSU beats Georgia?
I think Georgia's still locked. Unless Georgia gets blown. I told you that, though. Unless Georgia gets blown out.
I agree.
Because justifying putting in over Georgia at that point. Because you're not putting in Alabama.
No.
You know the committee's not going to go without having one SEC team in this thing.
LSU already blew their chance by losing last week.
So I mean, you're not putting in Bama with 2 losses then, because they weren't a conference champion. Georgia wouldn't be either, but Georgia would only have 1 loss.
Yeah, but Georgia would become a 4 seed at that point.
Man, the rankings would get interesting. Michigan would probably go to 1. Michigan would go to 1 in that scenario.
I'm surprised Michigan's not at 1 right now.
They might be. Tomorrow night they might be.
That's true.
I think actually, I'll say this, there's a strong chance they'll be number 1 tomorrow night. I just think that win in the committee's eye is really going to stand out. And if you look at Georgia, outside of that Tennessee win, let me rephrase that. That Oregon win is still impressive. I mean, whatever way you want to look at it, you could say it's the beginning of the year. It's still impressive. I mean, they absolutely took them to the woodshed, 49-3. South Carolina's ranked now, though. Another one that they have. Mississippi State's now ranked.
Yeah,
so that's 2 top 25s. Tennessee is still ranked, so that's 3. It's tough. Michigan's big win is against Ohio State. Does the committee value that win that highly to put Michigan over Georgia? That's the question.
Yeah, I think they do.
Yeah, I think Michigan ends up going.
LSU did
number 1.
LSU did everybody a favor by winning that side of the SEC, because we would be staring down Georgia, Alabama, and possibly have both of them in the playoff again. So at least best case scenario, they don't make it together. So that's good, right? We got one SEC team. One SEC team, possibly 2 Big Ten teams for the first time. I think it's been long overdue for the playoff. We'll see. We'll see how the rest pans out.
Here's my thing, and it pains me to say this because I want to hope that they're not in it. If they put Alabama at 6, to me, they are in the conversation. Alabama, I don't want to say it because I don't like Alabama, but I think they're in the conversation. If there's a loss,
they don't have anything. They don't have anything else.
They don't. You're right. Alabama does not have a great case to get in. The only reason they have a case to get in is because their name is Alabama. That's really it. There's no other reason in my mind you can even put them in. Their schedule at this point, I mean, they lost to Tennessee. They lost to LSU. They beat Mississippi State, who's now ranked. So, I mean, whoop-de-doo. And they beat Texas by 1 point. That's it. It's not great. It's not great. So your top 6, I assume you have you already said your top 4, so I assume you have Alabama at 6, Ohio State at 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna change. Michigan's gonna be number 1, Georgia 2, USC, TCU, TCU, USC, and then Ohio State, Alabama.
Okay, perfect. All right, so for mine, probably gonna be very similar to yours. I'm just trying to see if there's anybody that's possibly nope. No one. It's pretty dry as far as 5 and 6. Alabama will be 6. So I think they deserve it just because there's no one really better to put at that spot. Ohio State will be 5. 4 will go to USC. TCU will be 3. Georgia 2. Michigan 1. I think that win against Ohio State is big. Really going to stand out. So, and I think USC is going to end up winning on Saturday. I think USC is going to punch their ticket on Saturday. Caleb Williams is going to win the Heisman. I don't know about TCU. That's the one game I don't know. TCU is the wild card in all of this. If Ohio State gets in, JD, with this. If Ohio State gets in, can they run the table? Can they somehow turn this horrific situation, because it's horrific, this loss against Michigan, in the mood we all have right now, can they turn that into a national championship? Think they can? You really do? Okay.
I have a very similar feeling to 2014, where it didn't seem like they would even hold water to Alabama, for most of the season. And the Big Ten championship, they turned it on and they didn't look back. That would be my best guess. Is they get if they sneak in as a 4 seed, they get a good draw. I think a good draw is either Georgia or Michigan. Just in terms of we've already played Michigan, we know what they're going to do. Georgia, I don't think Georgia's that good, but I think that we could run the table. But if we somehow end up with USC first round, USC, I think it's going to be. I think USC is going to win a national championship this year.
Ooh, I like that. See, that's my dark horse if they get in. I just love what Lincoln Riley's doing. I really do.
I had Caleb Williams as the dark horse Heisman winner this year, and I'm pretty sure he's going to win it. So.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty sure of that. But it's going to be interesting to see again where the Buckeyes are tomorrow night. We all have a general idea, but still curious. We want to hear how the committee views Ohio State now, with possibly if TCU or USC loses. So something to monitor for tomorrow night. Remember, the college football playoff selection show is on at 7 o'clock tomorrow on ESPN. As we wrap things up, want to take time to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Scarlet and Gray Podcast. We aired some grievances tonight. We're trying to move on. Looking like we're going to have a college football preview show at 11 o'clock on Sunday. We'll make a formal announcement about that later this week. We'll see where things are at, but there's a good chance we're going to end up doing that unless there are some network conflicts due to Deshaun Watson first start of the season, if there's going to be a Browns pregame show. Either way, we'll keep you guys updated. Remember, you guys can subscribe to the YouTube channel for free. Also, drop a like on the video, which helps the channel grow immensely. We're back tomorrow night on Network 216 here on the YouTube channel with the Yard Dogs podcast and the Barking Brown Show. Thank you all for tuning into this episode. This has been the Scarlet and Gray Podcast. We'll talk to you all next week, and go Buckeyes.